Welcome back. All right, so I wanted to take a look at the wild card picture in the East today. In that we've got 12 games on tonight, why not take a look at this now? We are also about a week out from the trade deadline, so this gives you an idea of why there's not very many sellers. In that I can argue any of these teams for a wild card spot. We'll take a look at the percentages as well because we're getting to that point in the year where the percentages start to come in terms of who's most likely to get there. We can have that discussion. Detroit's at the top of the board, and Detroit's had a really good run lately. They're 8-1-1 in their last 10. They've won 2 in a row. They have easily the best record out of any team that's on this board. So I don't know that they're getting the respect that they should. And I think part of it is they faded last year. They, of course, missed the playoffs just in the last night of the year. And there might be some that are expecting something to happen that keeps Detroit out of the playoffs. So they've played 58 games. They have a record of 30, 22, and 6, 66 points. So they're 4 points ahead of the playoff line. 22 regulation wins. Keep in mind that that's the tiebreaker if you get into the playoffs. And it's a big advantage for the New York Rangers, who are hanging out far closer to the playoffs than they were, say, 6 weeks ago. So for Detroit, they're 16, 12, and 3 at home and 14, 10, and 3 on the road. They are 4 games above 500 at both at home and away. 8 out of their 14 games in March on the road. March is a very busy month, and Detroit's one of the least busy teams on the board, even though 14 games is a lot. There are teams on the board with 15 or even 16 games in the month of March. So for Detroit, in goal differential, they have a -10. The only one with a positive goal differential on the board is actually Columbus, and we'll get to them in a moment. But when you look at the playoff odds, the Athletics giving them a 42% chance of making the playoffs. Hockey Reference, 50% chance of making the playoffs. Money Puck is the highest on Detroit. Money Puck with a 55.6% chance for Detroit. And I know these numbers change from night to night, but they're still fun to look at. Then we get to Columbus, and I'm wearing Columbus because I don't think any of us expected them to be this close this year. They played 58 games as well. 28, 22, and 8 record, 64 points. They have 20 regulation wins, a +4 goal differential. So as mentioned, there's a positive there. The disparity of their record at home and away is just shocking. So on the road, 9, 16, and 4. If they had that same record at home, they'd be down around where Buffalo is, lower than Buffalo actually, but on the road is not the same as at home. At home, 19, 6, and 4. So excellent record at home. On the road, not so much. If they could play on the road anywhere near the way they do at home, they'd be fine. And I've been saying this since November, December, that if Columbus ever gets their game on the road together, they're basically a shoe in for the playoffs and might be able to push their way to a top 3 spot in the Metro. So they're 5-4-1 in their last 10. They've won 2 in a row. They only play 13 games in March. 7 of those 13 games are on the road, though. And looking at their road record, it has to get better or they're not keeping that spot. It's just that simple. They have a 36% chance of making the playoffs, according to The Athletic. A 47.9% chance, according to Hockey Reference. So they like them. Money Puck does not. 18.8% chance of making the playoffs, according to Money Puck simulators. So Columbus, we'll see if Hockey Reference is right to have some faith in them, or if Money Puck knows something about the upcoming schedule and they start to fade. Now, as mentioned, the New York Rangers are just below the line. 58 games, 29, 25, and 4 record. 62 points, 27 regulation wins. That's why they're listed ahead of Ottawa. They have a -3 goal differential. That's been getting better lately, though, I do believe. At home, they're 14, 12, and 2, and on the road, they're 15, 13, and 2. So 2 games above NHL 500, both at home and on the road. 5-5 in their last 10. They have won 2 in a row. 8 of their 15 games in March are at home. As I mentioned, though, they seem to be playing equally as well at home as on the road this season. But we'll see. If the JT Miller trade seems to have affected them positively, we'll see if that continues to be the case in March. So, according to The Athletic, they have a 36% chance of making the playoffs. Hockey Reference has them at 32.9%, and Money Puck has them at 47.6%. So all 3 of the models saying, yeah, the Rangers are dangerous and could absolutely get in there, with Money Puck being the one saying they're most likely out of the 3 predictors. Then you've got the Ottawa Senators, same record as the New York Rangers, 58 games, 29, 25, and 4 record, so 62 points, 22 wins in regulation. So for Ottawa, they don't have the tiebreaker on the Rangers, and odds are if they end up with the same amount of points as Detroit, Detroit will likely have less regulation wins than Ottawa, so Ottawa's still not in terrible shape here, but at home they're 16-9-2, and on the road they're 13-16-2, and that's going to be important. Over their last 10 games, they're 5-5, but they've lost their 5 most recent games, which takes away whatever momentum they had from the winning streak going into that. And then the other problem is 9 of their 15 games in March are away from home. So that is going to be difficult for Ottawa, and we're going to find out what they're made of in the month of March. This is a team that has stayed above the playoff line, been close to the playoff line almost all season, and now they're going to get that really big test in March. Now, according to The Athletic, 50% chance of making the playoffs, the highest number on the board. According to Hockey Reference, 42.2% chance of making the playoffs. That is the third highest number for Hockey Reference. And according to Money Puck, 48.8% chance of making it, the second highest number on the board, just barely nudging out the New York Rangers. It's going to be quite the run to the finish here. Then you got Boston in a very unusual position of not being likely to make it. Now they've played 59 games, so they don't have games in hand on the teams they're chasing. 27-24-8 record, so 62 points as well. 20 regulation wins, so they've got less regulation wins than Ottawa, than the Rangers or Detroit. And negative 27 goal differential. Did I mention Ottawa's negative 4 goal differential? If I didn't, I just did. So negative 27 it's accurate. Boston does get blown out often enough that, yeah, that makes some sense. At home, they're 18-9-5. On the road, not so much. 9-15-3 on the road this season. They're 4-4-2 in their last 10 games, and they've had losses in extra time their last 2 games out. And 10 of their 14 games in the month of March are away from TD Garden. So Boston is in tough. And the percentages here show that. So while they're tied in points with Ottawa and the Rangers, in terms of odds of making the playoffs, The Athletic has them at 19%. Hockey Reference has them at 13.9%, and Money Puck has them at 16.2%. I really honestly believe teams from Boston down may very well be sellers by this time next week, and maybe selling off some assets. So we don't have as many sellers as we normally would at trade deadline, but I think that's going to change. Boston has to see the writing on the wall here that it's very likely not going to happen, but they have a week to show management that they can do it. So personally, I think like a sell, and not selling off everybody, obviously. I don't like that idea, but just selling off expiring contracts. Maybe figure out a way to get an extension done with Marchand. He wants to stick around, but outside of that, we're going to see some guys leave the team. Montreal, at least I think so. Montreal, 58 games, 27-26-5 record, 59 points. 20 regulation wins for them as well. They have a negative 24 in goal differential. So their goal differential is actually a little bit better than Boston's. At home, they're 14-12-4. On the road, they're 13-14-1. So for Montreal, the record pretty similar at home to away from home. They are 3-6-1 in their last 10. They've won 2 in a row. 10 of 14 games in March are on the road. So Montreal's in tough from that perspective as well, and it shows in the percentages. The Athletic gives Montreal a 4% chance of making the playoffs. The Hockey Reference people, 11.7% from their number, and that's the highest number on the board. And then Money Puck has Montreal at a 7.3% chance of making the playoffs. So for the Habs, just the fact that they're in the hunt, and that's the important thing. My prediction for them before the season was probably not playoffs, probably above 500. And right now it looks like that's where they're going to be. And it's about that just gradual build, right? Philadelphia, 59 games, 26-26-7 record, 59 points, 17 regulation wins. So Philadelphia doesn't have a tiebreaker on anybody when it comes to regulation wins, which makes things more difficult. Negative 22 goal differential, so better than Montreal's or Boston's. I attribute that in part to the style of hockey they play under Tortorella and the fact they just don't get blown out at that often. At home, they're 15-13-1. On the road, they're 11-13-6. Philadelphia's 4-5-1 in their last 10. They have won 3 in a row. They have 10 of 16 games are at home in March. So they do have a lot of home games. They have a decent home record. Who knows? They currently sit 5 points out of the playoffs. I still think they'll be selling by this time next week. So 5% chance of making the playoffs according to The Athletic. Sounds about right. 4.8% chance according to Hockey Reference, and Money Puck gives them a 2.2% chance of making the playoffs. So, but they're on the board and Pittsburgh isn't. So that's the strangest thing for this season. The New York Islanders, 57 games played, 25-25-7 records, so 57 points. 19 regulation wins for the Islanders, who sit 7 points out of a playoff spot. At home, they're 13-13-2. On the road, 12-12-5. So 500 on both. They're 5-5 in their last 10, so another 500 record, although they've lost 4 in a row. This is the thing. We saw some teams that were playing really, really well, and then they fell off. Montreal being one that's done that. The Islanders now. The Senators doing it. And I know injuries have been a factor, but it really does show just how quickly things can change in the Eastern picture. Now, for the Islanders, 8 of their 15 games in March are at home. So, I mean, they're going to be busy, but their record at home is very similar to away from home. Obviously, Philadelphia's the busiest with 16 games in 31 days. That's rough. The Islanders also, the goal differential, though, negative 15, better than Philadelphia, Montreal, or Boston. 13% chance of making the playoffs according to The Athletic, so better percent chance than Philadelphia or Montreal. Not as solid a chance as Boston. 7.5% chance of making it according to Hockey Reference, so ahead of Philadelphia, behind Montreal on Hockey Reference. On Money Puck, 15% chance of making the playoffs for the Philadelphia Flyers, ahead of Montreal, ahead of Philadelphia, and almost as high as Boston. The Islanders might be a team to watch because the Islanders have been a team to watch down the stretch in recent seasons anyways. But it is going to be a fascinating picture. It is not quite the race that it was, say, a month ago. When I last, did a video sort of like this, and I was talking about just how tremendously well a lot of teams were playing in the East. Things have kind of balanced out, but Detroit for me is still, they have to make it. Detroit absolutely has to make it. If I had to pick somebody else in the East to make it, I hope it's Ottawa. There's part of me that would love to see Detroit and Ottawa both make the playoffs the same season. And then Columbus. I'd love to see Columbus get in there. But I do look at the Rangers and say, you know what? The Rangers are definitely better than their record. They shouldn't be in this position in the first place. Are we going to see them in the month of March finally take their place in the playoffs? And will it be the Rangers and the Wings that make it? So let me know your thoughts. Which teams do you think are going to emerge as playoff teams for the playoffs in the East? Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And don't worry, I will be doing ones on the West as well. The pictures in both conferences, very tight. And I think the fact, too, that this late in the season, a team that's 6 games above 500 is above a playoff spot in the East. This is why you don't see so many sellers right now in the National Hockey League and so many general managers that are looking at the standings and saying, you know what? We've still got a shot at this. They're not wrong. Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.